Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Anam, and I'm a DEI and anti-racism facilitator based in Vancouver, BC. And before I get any further into this video, I would like to say that I am working and living on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. Land acknowledgements for me are the bare minimum. They're just a way to challenge the colonial narrative and to reattribute agency to the indigenous stewards who have been taking care of these lands since time immemorial. I am a Pakistani and I am a visitor here, and being here has taught me so much about my own relationship with colonization and colonialism, and most of all has taught me how to begin healing from Pakistan's legacy as a colonized nation. All of this is, of course, holding close the reality that Pakistan's history does hold a lot of violence and erasure of indigenous communities and also of various identities within the nation. And I am here because of that. I am here to commit to this journey of learning and to center the voices of the peoples that have been forced, unjustly forced, to be resilient throughout this entire process. So what are we going to be doing today? I want to talk a little bit about why I have started to do this work. So a big push for me in doing any kind of equity work or any kind of equity education is being able to bridge that gap between all of the great work done by academics and bringing that down to a level where we can disseminate that information in a way that is accessible and actionable. And so, with that, I welcome you to Unpicking the Lock. This is going to be a series of what I like to call pocket workshops. Really, they're just mini workshops. And we will be talking about subjects that you don't really talk about on a day-to-day basis, or subjects that haven't been addressed in accessible ways outside the realm of academia. Each of these workshops will be about 10 to 15 minutes long, and they're going to be a real deep dive into these subjects, so it should be good. Today's focus will be on decolonizing deadlines and understanding time as a little more intentional and tailored to colonial efforts that we may realize. Some incredible work has already been done on this topic, primarily by Larissa Crawford, who founded and leads Future Ancestors, which is a speakers bureau working to decolonize and re-indigenize spaces. And I would like to preface this workshop by attributing full credit to them and saying thank you for the ways in which they have shared their information and expertise so generously with the world. I will link their work later on in the presentation, but I'll also leave a link to it in the description below this video. So we have four main objectives for today's session. We'll be understanding time as its colonial legacy. We'll be describing temporal rigidity and how it can show up in the workplace and the effects of this, and also exploring ways in which we can address deadlines. This workshop is geared towards unpacking these dynamics in a workplace setting, but you can totally extend these learnings to any sphere of your life where it feels applicable, and I actually urge you to keep an open mind throughout the session and see where you can find these rigidities leading your narratives. Now, I've been talking about temporal rigidity, which sounds a lot fancier than it needs to be. When I say temporal rigidity, I'm referring to a couple of things. First, I am referring to exactly what you might think I'm referring to, which is harsh deadlines and tight timelines and all of the harmful dynamics that we see present in contemporary workplaces. But I'm also referring to our understandings of time on a global scale. We work against this unspoken understanding that what we know as history is the antithesis or the antonym to what we know as progress. Time is assumed to work on a linear scale. There is no end in sight, but there is a clear beginning, and in order to grow in intelligence and capacity and productivity, we must stray as far from this beginning as we possibly can. These are contradictory to many cultural understandings of time and learning, and are the understandings that underpin the justification of colonization. Under this guise, indigenous communities were seen as being without time. They were seen as timeless. They were seen as being so detached from the linearity and progress that European colonizers were searching for that their very existence under the colonial gaze was inherently backwards. They were seen as being part of the past, and it became Europe's self-assumed responsibility to bring them and their lands into the present. So you have a few words on the screen here. And as you might already guess at first glance, these are words that are a lot of the time associated with first peoples and their ways of being. So words like primitive, prehistoric, ancient, they all reinforce this idea of an objective timeline. But really think about what are the actual connotations of these words. Who is centered in the definitions and who is dictating the position of the indigenous peoples when we refer to them using these words. So this is all reflective of a colonial understanding of time, ways of being, and also ways of operating. So a lot of these connotations of time carry through into the workplace. The idea that we must constantly be generating, that we must constantly be producing and presenting ourselves as ready to be extracted from in terms of time and energy is rooted in a colonial understanding of what it means to be of value. When we talk about someone reaching their full potential in the workplace, we talk about them producing as much product as they possibly can, and we center the product over the person. Colonialism in the workplace can look like harsh deadlines, short timelines, unrealistic workloads, and a perpetual sense of urgency, both as a general atmosphere, but also as an urgency to move forward and away from stasis. You'll notice that none of these honor the autonomy and sovereignty of a person. Expectations are more of an imperative than they are a mutual understanding, and the cost of refusal and disengagement is quite high. The effects of all of these standards are vast and deeply rooted in the lack of agency that's attributed to the employee in the workplace. Not only can they result in worsened mental and physical health with higher rates of burnout, higher rates of anxiety and stress, but they can also establish an often non-consensual power dynamic. And like I said, the cost of disengagement is high. And so there is an aspect of control that is used to reinforce this cost. And while power dynamics can be consensual at times, they do risk harming relationships and ensuing mistrust and resentment. A culture of urgency can also limit imagination. In my opinion, the most rewarding kind of work is the work that comes with a freedom of creativity and where you're granted the room to explore the ways in which the work you're doing can be reimagined and accessed. Creativity inherently requires agency, and when this is taken away from an individual, generative work becomes static and unmoving, and cycles of control are reestablished. This then can also lead to a reduced quality of work that's being offered. So when we're confronted with a situation that is extractive, that takes from us in a way that we don't fully consent to, there's a few questions that we can ask ourselves. The first question is, who does this deadline benefit? Are both or all parties involved consensually ceding their time, efforts, and energy? And what is the goal that achieving this deadline is informing? The second question we can ask is, what is the cost of this deadline? Who loses out, and what exactly is being lost in the process? Are there processes and measures put in place such as flexibility, priority shifts to account for these potential losses? If the person chooses not to fulfill this deadline, what does it cost them? And is this a reasonable and ethical cost? Another question you can ask is, what values are being reinforced? This is to do with everything that we talked about today. Does it reinforce colonial and Eurocentric ways of knowing and operating? Is everyone in this situation granted autonomy, and is anyone restricted from participating? Does this deadline account for abilities, accessibility needs, cultural needs, and community needs? Does it center community care, or does it center individual gain? You'll see a link at the bottom here that you can click to read an article by Larissa Crawford in which they share ways in which their organization has addressed decolonizing deadlines and worked towards re-indigenizing their workplaces. I highly recommend that you have a look at it, and again, I'll link it in the description as well. So we've explored a few ways in which colonial understandings of time and progress and linearity can show up in the workplace. But I have a task for you. So at the end of every pocket workshop, I'll set you a LAP, an LAP, a learning application practice task, whatever you want to call it, which would be great if you would complete within the next week. So for this week, I want you to reflect and think about a deadline that's been hovering in your headspace right now or for the last few days. It can be one that you set for yourself or one that someone else set for you. And then I want you to hold a conversation with the person that set this deadline. If it's yourself, that's perfectly fine. Just write your answers on a piece of paper or type them out. But ask yourself or this person one or two of these questions that we explored in the last slide. Pick the ones that resonate best with you and the situation at hand, and see if you can work together to create an alternative plan that honors your agency and community care principles. And that's that. Um, these workshops are really short, and I hope that that makes them more accessible, something that you can just watch on the go. But thank you for watching, and thank you for engaging with me in the first of these pocket workshops. I'm personally really excited to, continue to develop these for you, and would love your input on topics that you want to chat about, but also the format in which you want the information delivered. This is obviously a pre-recording, but if you would like a space where you can ask questions and actively engage with each other, let me know and I'll figure that out. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments or send me a message and I'll answer them as soon as I can. But until then, thank you. Here are my socials and take care. I'll see you next time.